Today is going to be our last installment of having a look at the new Lost Caverns of Ixalan cards. We're going to look at the multicolour cards, the colourless cards, and the lands in the set in a way that's going to hopefully help you learn how to use them in Standard and potentially in drafting as well, if you also draft to build out your collection at the beginning of a new set coming up. And these two-colour archetypes will come up in draft quite a bit, so hopefully that's going to help. So stay tuned and we're going to have a look through these cards as quickly as we can. Welcome back to the channel. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content. All right, let's break down these different cards, starting with the colourless cards, and then we'll move on to the others as quickly as we can. So first of all, we have Abuelo Ancestral Echo, a 3-mana 2/2 legendary creature with flying, war 2, and the ability to pay 3 mana to blink something, exile another target creature or artifact you control, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So it's an interesting ability that it has. Obviously, there are lots of white and blue artifact synergies in the set, but the ability to also blink something at instant speed, the 3 mana, you could get something like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, use this in Standard and put this ability on every creature you have, possibly. And a 2/2 flyer with War 2 is not too bad either. So interesting combos we could do with this, interesting synergies with other, artifacts in particular. Blue and white are very good colours for artifacts in general in Standard. So I can see this working out in a few different places. Not one I'd craft immediately, but I'm sure you could make some interesting decks using this card. Right, okay, on to the next page. Then we've got Master's Guide Mural, a 5-mana artifact. When it enters, you create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token, which isn't very much for 5 mana, but if we're able to craft this with another artifact, it costs 7 mana. But when you do that, it becomes the Master's Manufactory, and if it does, you can tap it to create a 4/4 white and blue golem artifact creature token, and you could do that every turn, as long as another artifact has entered the battlefield, or this card itself is transformed, or another artifact has entered the battlefield under your control this turn. You could potentially untap this and tap it again, so you're just turning out 4/4 creatures by the time you get there. So a slightly slower, more control-y white and blue artifact deck could see this creating lots and lots of artifact creatures, and there are other ways to boost artifact creatures as well. So yeah, for that kind of deck, I could see this potentially working out. Then moving on to blue and black Dimir colours, we have the Ancient One, a 2-mana 8/8 creature, a legendary spirit god. Now this has Descent 8. You can't attack or block unless you have 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, and you can pay 4 to draw a card, discard a card, and cause a player, whether it's the opponent or yourself, to mill cards equal to its mana value. So potentially milling a lot if you have lots of high mana value cards that you can discard. But where I think you'll see this more often is triggering things like fight rigging, because you get fight rigging to trigger on turn 3, which is really good. I'm not sure if there's any other creatures that allow you to trigger it on turn 3. Obviously the colours are a little bit awkward, but most people would use something like a Shakedown Heavy, which comes down on turn 3, and fight rigging is also turn 3, so you have to pick one or the other. So yeah, I can see it being used for that, or it could be used for something like the casualty ability of an Ob Nixilis Planeswalker, because if you can get that to more than 7 to start with, you can use its ultimate ability. If you have the Ancient One out on turn 2, and a Sheoldred out as soon as possible, turn 4, and then you get Ob Nixilis Adversary, the Planeswalker, to sacrifice the Ancient One, you could do the ultimate ability and kill your opponent in one turn, because Sheoldred would drain them for all the life when they draw lots of cards. So I think this is more likely to be used in kind of janky ways like that, or maybe like flinging it, sacrificing it, doing damage equal to its power to an opponent, rather than trying to get to Descend 8 and slowly drawing, discarding, milling. You might get that, but I kind of feel like the fact that it's 8/8 means it'll be used in different ways instead. So a fun one to use in different decks. And then we've got Ukbenbak, the Great Mistake, a 5-mana 6/4 Vigilance Menace legendary skeleton horror creature. Also has Descend 8, which means you can pay 6 mana to return it from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. So one last, time on the battlefield before it's exiled if it dies again. So 5 mana for a 6/4 Vigilance Menace that you can pay another 6 potentially later on to bring it back one more time. I don't think it's that great. It seems kind of expensive for what you get. I'm sure there are other creatures and cards that you could cast for this cost that would be better, probably. So it'd be interesting if there's any way to use this that I haven't thought of, but it seems like it's okay at the moment. Then we have Whale of the Forgotten, a 2-mana sorcery, again with Descend 8, cares about the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and you can choose one of these if you don't have Descend 8, or up to all 3 of them if you do have Descend 8. Return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, target opponent discards a card, and look at the top 3 cards of your library, put 1 into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Now, if you can do all 3 of those, the 2 mana, that is a lot of value, and that's really, really good. If you can only choose one, discarding a card, returning a non-land permanent, or looking at the top 3, put 1 into your hand, the rest into your graveyard, it's kind of okay in all of those. It's not particularly great. There are better ways to do each of those things. Return non-land permanents, discard something, and look at the top 3. There are better ways of doing each of those. So, and potentially at instant speed for some of them. So if you don't have Descent 8, it's okay for the versatility of it, but each one of those things could be done better somewhere else. If you do have Descend 8, then you get loads of value from this. So if there's any good decks that get to Descend 8 quickly enough, or get to control the game for long enough to get to Descend 8, then I can see this being played in those kind of decks. Okay, then we're on to Rakdos colours. We're on black and red. First card is Molten Collapse, a sorcery for 2 mana. You get to choose one of these, destroying a creature or planeswalker, or destroying a non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. If you descended this turn, you can choose both. Destroying a creature or planeswalker for 2 mana, sorcery speed, but no other restrictions on the type of creature is really good. Slightly more awkward with the mana colours than some other removal spells, and a little bit slower, but still a good option for these colours. Being able to destroy a non-creature, non-land permanent with mana value 1 or less. I don't know what you would be destroying with that, apart from like treasure tokens, map tokens, power stone tokens. It's not a creature, it's not a land. It's just going to be, an enchantment, an artifact. Won't be a battle or a planeswalker for mana value 1 or less. So pretty much, an enchantment or an artifact that's mana value 1 or less would be maybe an equipment, but more likely to be like, I don't know, a treasure token, a power stone, blood token, map token. I don't think it's necessarily that good, that second part. See if that comes up anywhere in standard as as meta develops, as games go on. But as just a destroy creature or planeswalker, it's a good card, a good enough one for those colours. So we have Zoyowa Lava Tongue, a 2-mana 2/2 creature with Death Touch. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, each opponent may discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. You deal 3 damage to the opponent who doesn't do this. So if they don't sacrifice a permanent or discard a card, if you're going to descend almost every turn, then this is a lot of value, making them discard or sacrifice something every turn, or do 3 damage. So if you're going to consistently descend, then I can see this doing a good amount of damage and being really annoying to play against. So yeah, a good one that you can get lots of different things out of, although it does give the opponent the option to discard or sacrifice or take 3 damage. Those are 3 different choices they can have, or 3 different options. So they'll obviously pick the one that hurts them the least. So if they have extra lands in their hand, they'll discard something. If they have loads of, token permanents they don't need, they'll just get rid of those. If they're gaining life, they'll take the 3 damage. So they'll always take the one that's worse for you, best for them. So possibly if you're going to trigger descend every turn, it's good. Otherwise, it's slightly awkward. Okay, then we have It's Quinth, Firstborn of Gishath. A 2-mana 2/3 dinosaur with haste. When it enters, you can pay 2 mana and make a creature a dinosaur you control deal damage equal to its power to another creature. So 2/3 for haste for 2 mana is good. Dinosaurs are really good in red and green. And the extra thing that makes it better is the fact that you can pay 2 and create, some removal if you have another dinosaur. There are probably better things you could do with 2 mana with dinosaurs, like maybe ramping, because dinosaurs tend to be expensive. So I don't know if I'd necessarily use this in a Gruul dinosaur deck. Potentially, it doesn't seem to be as good as other options. Okay, then we've got Alani's Hatcher, a 5 mana, 5/3 dinosaur. Gives all other dinosaurs you control haste, which is really good. And it creates 2/0/1 dinosaur egg tokens, creature tokens. And at the beginning of combat, if you're playing this Hatcher before combat, you get a 3/3 dinosaur immediately, and it has haste. So 5 mana for a 5/3 and a 3/3 with haste, and another dinosaur egg that could potentially be a 3/3 with haste. That's a lot of value there for 5 mana. I can see that working out. I mean, obviously, it's not the same as the 2 mana one we just looked at. I could see this being used in dinosaur decks much more than the other one. And if you're going to play the dinosaur, the 6 mana dinosaur that draws cards equal to the number of dinosaurs you have, well, if you put this out on if you put this out on turn 5, then you have 3 additional dinosaurs, and then next turn you put the other one out, you're going to draw at least 3 cards from those 3 dinosaurs being out there. So it helps you go really wide with dinosaurs. So yeah, I like that one. It's really good. Okay, then we've got Kutzil Malamet Exemplar, a 3 mana, 3/3. We're now in green and white colours, Selesnya colours. It's a legendary creature, a cat warrior. It stops your opponents from casting spells during your turn, so it shuts down their instants. Real pain for control players. They're going to hate this. They're going to want to kill it pretty quickly. And whenever one or more creatures you control with power greater than its base power doing combat damage to an opponent, you get to draw a card. So if you're buffing lots of creatures, if all your creatures have +1/+1 and they hit, you're going to be drawing. You're going to draw a card for whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player. So if you have 5 attacking and they all deal combat damage to a player with power greater than their base power, you're still only going to draw 1 card, because that's 1 card whenever one or more does that. If it said whenever a creature does damage to the opponent, it would draw a card for every creature. It's important to remember that's only really 1. So you're going to want to either get 1 creature to sneak through with slightly higher power than its base power, or just attack with lots of things anyway, but you're only going to get 1 card. Then we've got Sovereign Okenek How. It's a 4 mana 3/4 legendary cat noble creature. It has Ward 2, which is nice, and when it attacks, for each creature you control with power greater than its base power, you put +1 counters onto that creature equal to the difference. So if its current power is only 1 more than its regular base power, it gets 1 +1 counter. If it's 3 more, it gets 3 +1 counters. So it really starts to escalate quite quickly. And if this survives, you attack once, they get +1 counters. You attack again, they'll get more +1 counters because their power is now higher than their base power, even higher than it was before. So I can see that escalating and getting all of your creatures to be pretty big, getting lots of +1 counters on them, and there are other ways to add additional +1 counters onto them. But this has to attack itself. It can't just, not like Adeline where anything attacks. The Sovereign has to attack itself, has to be the one attacking for you to get those +1 counters on the other creatures. So it might die to a good block. Okay, so now we're into Orzhov colours. We've got white and black. First of all, tends to be vampires in this set. We have Amalia Benavides Aguirre. I can't pronounce names. It's a 2 mana 2/2 creature. Has ward, pay 3 life, which is okay. I mean, it doesn't tend to stop people that much. Paying life, they tend to have more trouble paying extra mana to destroy things. And whenever you gain life, Amalia explores. Can get an extra +1 counter, or just put a land into your hand. And when its power is exactly 20, it destroys all other creatures. Now, getting Amalia's power to 20 is not easy. There are combos you can do with cards from older sets, with other Ixalan things, like whenever you explore, you gain life, and it will just go round and round. But in this set by itself, in current standard, there aren't any other ways to basically explore when you get gain life when you explore. Not that I'm aware of. Let me know if you can think of any other ways you could use this in standard. But yeah, so it's going to be a bit slow getting that up, but it does eventually get an extra card into your land from your library into your hand, or getting a +1 counter on it every turn. So it can do a few things as it grows. Then we've got Bartolome del Presidio, a 2-mana 2/1 creature. You can sacrifice another creature or artifact at instant speed, a +1/+1 counter on itself, which is good if one of your creatures is going to die or be exiled or whatever it might be, and you can then sacrifice it at instant speed, get value from that. So it's going to grow. Yeah, it might be good in draft, but I don't see it happening that much in standard. They are kind of awkward, these ones, because with the next one, with Vito, Fanatic of Eclazots, I have to think before I say it, is a 4-mana 4/4 flying legendary creature, a vampire demon. Whenever you sacrifice another permanent, gain 2 life. If it's the first time, if it's the second time, the opponent loses 2 life. If it's the third time, you create a 4/3 vampire demon creature with flying. So lots of value if you can sacrifice 3 things on a turn. There are ways you can potentially do that with things like Evolving Wilds or those other lands that sacrifice themselves. Sacrificing treasure tokens, blood tokens, those kind of things. They are permanents, so that will trigger. The combo you can do with these, a little bit hard to set up. If you have all 3 of these black and white creatures out, you can sacrifice something, and then you can gain life because you sacrifice something, and then you can explore because you gain life. And you can do that round around a few times, then sacrifice something else, gain some life, explore again. So you can get there. I mean, it's not incredibly slow, and as this creature gets bigger, it's slightly harder to deal with for certain colors, but you can kind of get that loop going round and growing Amalia. The thing is, when you get to 20, it will destroy all your other creatures that you've got, so not ideal necessarily. And by that point, the opponent might have something where they can just murder it, and you're kind of stuck at nothing. So you can work those cards together, but they are pretty awkward. Okay, then we've got Captain Storm, Cosmium Raider, a 2-mana, this is blue and red, 2/2 legendary human pirate. So, basic colors are pirate colors in Ixalan. Whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target pirate you control. So, the +1 counter could go on Captain Storm or any other pirate you have whenever an artifact enters the battlefield. So there are things like the Mother Lode that could potentially create lots and lots of treasure tokens, or just things like Big Score that will create treasures, or other artifact cards that create additional artifacts. You could put +1 counters all over the place here with Captain Storm, so that could be pretty good. Then we've got Saheeli, the Sun's Brilliance, a 2-mana 2/2 legendary creature, human, artificer, and you can pay the blue and the red, 2-mana, tap it, create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste, sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So if it's something that's legendary, the legend rule still applies. It's not a non-legendary token, but being able to create a token copy of any other creature or artifact you control is pretty powerful just for 2-mana. Gaining haste and sacrificing at the end of the next step. It's kind of similar to the Fable of the Mirror Breaker, being able to, well, the final reflection of Kiki Jiki side of it, being able to create tokens that are a copy of other creatures you control, gaining haste, sacrificing them. So it's kind of along those lines. So there might be a few different ways you can, get ETB effects or death effects on certain creatures, so you want to copy those ones. So I could see that being used in a few different interesting ways. Then we have a 4-mana vehicle. This is called the Belligerent. It's a ship. It's a 5/5 for 4-mana. When it attacks, you create a treasure token, which is good for pirates. Until end of turn, you can look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. It has crew 3. Will it be used very much? If there's some decent pirate cards with power 3, or that can get to power 3, maybe Captain Storm can put +1 counters on things, then the Belligerent could be kind of decent in a pirate deck. I don't think pirate decks are going to be taking over standard anytime soon, so not worth necessarily crafting these, but it could work in draft, or it could work in some fun decks that might not be quite so competitive. Okay, then we're on to green and black colours. We have Akawali, the Seething Tower, a 3-mana 3/3 legendary fungus. It has Descend 4. There are 4 or more permanents in your graveyard. It gets +2/+2 and Trample. So it goes from a 3-mana 3/3 to a 3-mana 5/5 with Trample, which is pretty good considering this is an uncommon. If you have Descend 8, there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard. It gets an additional +2/+2 and can't be blocked by more than one creature. So it's going to be, at that point, a 7/7 Trample that can't be blocked by more than one creature. So that's quite a lot of value if you get to Descend 8. Obviously, like I said, it's just a case of enabling that. If you can't enable that, 3-mana 3/3 is okay, but if you can enable that, 5/5 with Trample or 7/7 that also can't be blocked with by more than one creature is a lot of value for 3 mana. Okay, so then we have Squirming Emergence, a 3-mana sorcery. Return to the battlefield target non-land permanent card from your graveyard with mana value less than or equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So if you have 4 in your graveyard, you can return something with mana value 4 or less. You have 10, it's mana value 10 or less, and so on. So yeah, it's a good spell to return something, for 3 mana. It's technically a really cheap reanimator spell, as long as you have lots of permanents in your graveyard at the time. So I wonder if we'll see this very much, considering a lot of other reanimation spells are at least 5 mana normally. So really cheap, and the only thing is you can't use it very early on for big creatures like Atraxa, Atali, Toxtril, because you need to have those permanents in your graveyard first in order to get the mana value for whatever you want to bring back. So interesting to have a cheap reanimator spell, can't be used immediately at the beginning. Okay, then we have the Myco Tyrant, a 3-mana star legendary creature. It's an elder fungus, so the king of the green and black decks in Ixalan. It has Trample, and its power and toughness are each equal to the number of creatures you control are fungi or saplings. So there's lots of other fungus creatures. You have a lot of them. This is going to be bigger. So also saplings. I don't think there's that many in standard, but I'll have to have a look to see if there are. But yeah, so at the very, very least, you lose all your other creatures. This is the 1/1. And if it's not, you have lots of other things that could be really big. Trample is what a big creature like that needs. Also, at the beginning of your end step, you create X 1/1 fungus creatures, where X is the number of times you descended this turn. So you get this out, you descend a few times somehow that turn, and then you're going to create lots more fungus creatures, which is going to make the Myco Tyrant much bigger. So the opponent will need a sweeper to bring down the power of Myco Tyrant, although a direct kill spell would do it as well. But then you end up with loads and loads of 1/1 fungus creatures that can't block, which is a bit like the rats from the last set, if you've managed to keep it around for a little bit. So potentially lots of value going really wide there, or going really tall with one creature. Then we have Anim Pakal, Thousandth Moon, a 3-mana, we're into red and white now, 3-mana 1/2 legendary creature, which is pretty low on stats, but whenever you attack with one or more non-gnome creatures, you put a +1/+1 counter here on Anim Pakal, and then create X 1/1 colourless gnomes that are tapped and attacking, which is very aggressive, where X is the number of +1/+1 counters on Anim Pakal. You have to attack with one or more non-gnome creatures. Have anything else that you can attack with. You get a +1 counter on this. It goes from being a 1/2 to a 2/3 at least, and then you start making gnome tokens from that point, which would be 1 to start with, and obviously scale up as the +1 counters grow. You could put +1 counters on here using other methods as well, and then it will accelerate the number of gnomes you get to make. Okay, right, on to the next page. Then we have Kaparokti Sunborn, a 4-mana 4/4 legendary creature. When it attacks, you may tap 2 untapped artifacts or creatures you control. If you do, discover 3. That's a pretty good amount of value, but you have to attack with a 4/4 that costs 4 mana, which is a good chance it's going to get blocked and died in a couple of turns. So you're not going to get that value very many times to start with. But being able to discover 3, if you have lots of things in your deck that are mana value 3 or less that are really powerful, then it's going to help you at least in that way. Then we have Quintorius Cand, a 5 mana Planeswalker with 4 loyalty counters when it starts. When you cast a spell from exile, it deals 2 damage to the opponent and you gain 2 life, which is really cool. +1 to create a 3/2 token, and -3 to discover 4, which is good if you have lots of things that cost 3 or 4 you want to cast. Or you can -6 to exile cards from your graveyard and add a red mana for each card exiled, and you can play those cards this turn. So with the static ability of doing 2 damage and gaining 2 life, that works with Discover because you're casting something from exile. That works with the -6 ability here because those cards are being exiled. So there are other ways it could work. Also work with like Pianalar and Thopters. You're casting lots of things from exile with that. Anything with the Adventure having been cast already, and then you have the other side to cast, it's being cast from exile. So there's lots of things you can cast from exile, and it's good. This gains you life and drains the opponent at the same time, and red and white tend to be colours that I enjoy playing around with. So I can see this being used possibly quite a bit in some decks that I might make, and it's also the one you get from the pre-order bundles if you buy the Mastery Pass bundle. So quite a few people are likely to have this card and try it out in some way. So let me know what you think. If you try this one out, is it any good? What have you done with it? Let me know in the comments. Okay, then we have Deep Fathom Echo, a 4 mana 4/4, which is now a green and blue card. It's a Merfolk spirit. At the beginning of combat on your turn, it explores. Then you may have it become a copy of another creature you control until end of turn. So, depending on what other creatures you have, this can become something really big, something really scary. It can become a Shieldred, who knows. Becomes a copy of another target creature you control until end of turn. Actually, I think if it's a legendary, that it will copy the legend rule as well. Then it would die, as far as I'm aware. So, yeah, something that gets to explore every turn is really good for those explore decks. Yeah, I'm sure there are creatures that care about exploring that you might want to turn this into that will then make a big difference. Yeah, interesting card there for exploring. Then we have Nikanzil, Current Conductor, a 2 mana 2/3 legendary Merfolk Scout. When a creature you control explores, when they explore a land card, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield tapped. So that upgrades explore to the ramping as well. And whenever a creature you control explores a non-land card, put an extra +1/+1 counter on Nikanzil again. So the creature that is exploring might get a +1 counter. You get another one here. It's kind of upgrading all those explore synergies to build a big creature and ramp you up as well. So that's really cool. Okay, then we have Gishath, Sun's Avatar, an 8 mana 7/6 legendary dinosaur. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you reveal that many cards from the top of your library and put any number of dinosaur creature cards from among them onto the battlefield. So obviously, red, green, and white, good dinosaur colors. This is a good chance it's going to hit, considering it's high power. It has haste, it has trample. There's no drawback to attacking with it, unless your opponent's going to definitely block it and kill it with something bigger. And yeah, you get to reveal lots of dinosaurs and put them straight back out onto the battlefield. Dinosaurs tend to be really expensive, or can be. So this can do lots of stuff, really, as long as it can get some damage through. So slightly harder to cast because it's big, and it has all 3 colors. But with the lands that we have available in Standard right now, the colors are not a problem at all. You have a 3-color land that covers those 3 colors anyway. So yeah, I can see it being used in lots of dinosaur decks. It's probably a little bit slower because other dinosaur decks are aiming to do lots of damage early on and finish them off, probably before turn 8 happens. But if you do get that long, you're definitely going to want to have this out to help you rebuild and build out your board really quickly and finish off the opponent. Okay, now we're on to the colourless cards for the set. The first one we have is the Throne of the Grim Captain. It's a 2-mana artifact where you can mill 2 cards, and you can craft with a dinosaur, merfolk, pirate, and a vampire. You need one of each of those at the very least, and pay 4. And then it turns into the Grim Captain. Now this is a Menace, Trample, Lifelink, Hexproof 7/7 creature. Whenever it attacks, the opponent will sacrifice a non-land permanent, and you can put an exiled creature card used to craft the Grim Captain onto the battlefield under your control, tapped and attacking. So you can basically put out a dinosaur, merfolk, pirate, or vampire for free. That's pretty crazy. And it's already attacking. So if it's a big creature with trample, if it's an Natali or something like that, you're going to get ETB triggers. You're going to get all kinds of things happening at once. It's a really good, creature this transforms into, but the craft cost is pretty expensive. But there are some things you could potentially do. Actually, I need to double check if this works, and I would like to try it out as soon as I can. But you want to craft this. I think you need to have. Let's think. What I'm thinking is, if you use something like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and you exile something else with craft, it'd have to be a creature with a craft ability. And then this would have to be a creature as well, actually, for it to craft. But generally, with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, if you have a craft ability, and then you exile that card with the Soul Cauldron, a +1 counter on something else that can craft, then I think you should be able to craft a big expensive crafting card with a smaller crafting cost if you exile the smaller crafting cost and put it on the bigger card. I think that does work. We'll have to try it out. But considering this isn't a creature, I think that would be a problem for this. So you're probably not going to be able to get around that too easily. You're going to want a dinosaur, merfolk, pirate, and a vampire, and because you can put them straight back out on the battlefield anyway. So interesting one to play around with. Really hard to do, but once it happens, a Menace, Trample, Lifelink, Hexproof 7/7 is pretty difficult to deal with, especially when it's going to bring out lots of other things for free. We'll see. It's not high cost. Only 4 mana to craft it, but you just have to have those things in your graveyard. I think we could make that happen somehow. And then we have Buried Treasure, a 2-mana artifact where you can sacrifice it immediately and add 1 mana of any color, which can potentially be nice, but isn't amazing. And then you can pay 5 mana to exile it from your graveyard and discover 5. So that's not too bad. It's basically giving you virtual card advantage because you're getting another card out, potentially playing it straight away. Yeah, you can also use, sacrifice it to add 1 mana of the color, and then you only need 4 other mana to exile it from the graveyard. So it kind of pays for itself in that way. So kind of technically ramping up, I think, if you're paying 4 other mana to be able to discover 5. But it's a bit of a gamble with discover, so might not see that much play. Okay, then we have Careening Minecart, a 3-mana, 3/3 vehicle. When it attacks, you create a treasure token. And it only has crew 1, so it's easy to crew. But, attacking with a 3/3, making a treasure token, it can potentially ramp you, or is getting more additional artifacts. But I don't think it's that powerful, really. There's other ways to create treasure tokens without having to crew something, without having to attack with something. So, I don't think you'll see that much of this, of the Careening Minecart. Okay, then we have Cartographer's Companion, a 3-mana, 2/1 artifact gnome. When it enters the battlefield, you create a map token, which you can pay 1, sacrifice the map token, and get a creature to explore. And obviously, the Cartographer's Companion is one that could explore immediately. So it could then become a 3/2 for 3, or just get you another land into your hand. So if in something that cares about exploring, it's going to have extra value. If it doesn't, it's not in a deck that cares about exploring, I don't think it's that amazing. Okay, then we have Chimil, the Inner Sun, a 6-mana legendary artifact. Now this one I think is really cool. Spells you control can't be countered, which is great. One-sided, counters don't work. It's great because you could still be countering your opponent's things. And artifacts work really well in white and blue in particular. So you might have counter spells in your deck if you're using this. And at the beginning of your end step, you get to discover 5. At the beginning of your end step every turn. If your opponent doesn't have artifact removal, this is a huge amount of value because it happens on the first turn. Pay 6 mana, get to discover 5. It's not removed straight away. Spells can't be countered, which is good. Although this could be countered, but once it's down, you're safe from counter spells. And you get to discover 5 every turn. So that's loads of value off that artifact. And the opponent might not be able to do anything about it. So I can see that working out pretty well, especially if you ramp up to it and get it down earlier. That seems really good. Okay, we've got Compass Gnome, a 2-mana, 2/1 artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land or a cave card, reveal it, then shuffle, and then put the card on top. You're not putting the card into your hand, you're just bringing it to the top of your library. So you know you're going to draw it next turn, or if you're going to explore, you know there's a land card or cave card on top. So maybe helps fix exploring if that really matters to you. But considering it doesn't put it into your hand, kind of annoying, I think. So I don't think it's going to be that good. If it put it into your hands, that'd be great. A bit like the farmhand, the 2-mana 1/1 white creature that gets her planes into your hand. But in this case, it's just not quite as good. But finding certain caves in your deck and bringing them to the top might be important, because caves, there's a few different caves you can use, and they all kind of do weird things. Okay, then we have Contested Game Ball, a 2-mana artifact that can tap for 2, draw a card, and you can do this 5 times before you sacrifice it, and make a treasure token. It has kind of Reckoner Bankbuster vibes about it, apart from there's one big drawback here, apart from it not being a 4/4 vehicle that you can crew, which creates its own creature that can crew it. But also, the opponent can steal this. If they do combat damage to you and they gain control, they can then start drawing cards. So this is only really good when your opponent doesn't have creatures, or if they're a deck with fewer creatures in it, then this is pretty good value. Overall, you can pay 12 mana over 5 turns to create to draw 5 extra cards whenever you have the mana available. So it's really flexible. This is one reason why I reckon the Bankbuster was so good. If your opponent can't steal this, then it worked really well. In draft, it's not going to work for you really, because you'll probably take damage every so often. You'll lose it. In Constructed, you can really control the board with, in terms of creatures, then this could be kind of useful, I think. Okay, then we have Digsite Conservator, a 2-mana 2/1 creature. When it comes out, you can sacrifice it, exile 4 target cards from a single graveyard, and activate only as a sorcery. When it dies, you may also pay 4 if you do discover 4. So you kind of want to have 4 in order to do this. But one thing it's kind of useful for is if your opponent is trying to descend up to 4 or 8 permanent cards, or they're going to reanimate something, you can sacrifice the conservator, and then you can exile those 4 cards from the graveyard, which reduces the number of permanents in the graveyard, so they can't necessarily get to descend faster. Or you can just take out a reanimator target, and there are some interesting reanimator spells in this set. So you could see a few reanimator targets as well. So that's pretty good by itself. But ideally, to get the most value out of this, you want to have the extra 4 mana to discover 4. Although, still with Discover, there's such a chance that it could not work out. You might find a 1-mana creature that you've paid 4 to draw and play out. It's not terrible, but that is the lowest value you could get from it, and it's not particularly good. But then if you get a 4-mana card, online card that you can play for free, that is really good. It just depends on what's in your deck. Okay, then we have Disruptor Wanderglyph, a 4-mana 3/4 artifact creature. Whenever it attacks, you can exile a card from the opponent's graveyard. Again, a creature that isn't that amazing, but it does help disrupt the opponent's plan if they're descending. So it kind of feels like something you might be more likely to have in a sideboard. But yeah, I don't think it's necessarily going to be used, considering the other cards you could possibly use for 4 mana might be even better than that. Then we have a Hoverstone Pilgrim, a 5-mana 2/5 artifact creature. It has flying and ward 2, and you can pay 2 to put a target card from a graveyard on the bottom of its owner's library. So like the other ones, it does disrupt descend, because you can take cards from the library, take cards from the graveyard and put them on the library. This also could be used for things like, I don't know, a squee that's in the graveyard, or a phoenix chick, or an underdog. Taking them out of the graveyard and putting them on the bottom of the owner's library is kind of like removing them from the graveyard. It is removing them from the graveyard, but it stops them coming back. So that's good, but will you see this 2/5 creature for 5 mana anywhere in Standard? I doubt it. I probably wouldn't use it in Draft either. So, interesting ability. And again, like with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, like you said before, you could possibly put that ability onto other creatures. But whether you want that ability or not, who knows? Probably not. Okay, next one we have Hunter's Blowgun, a 1 mana artifact equipment. Gives an equipped creature +1/+1. Equipped cost is 2. And the creature has Death Touch as long as it's your turn. Has Reach if it's not your turn. So Reach makes it a slightly better blocker. Death Touch makes it a more threatening attacker. Makes the opponent not want to block. Really good on something with Trample, because Death Touch and Trample work together really well. Really good on a creature that, when it does combat damage, something happens. Because if they don't want to block it, much better chance it's going to do Death Touch. Much better chance it's going to hit for combat damage and then trigger the other ability. And Reach is only really good if you have a creature that's bigger that can block bigger flying things. So I can see it being used in certain ways, but in general, equipment like this doesn't tend to get used that much. Okay, so next we have Matzalanthli, the Great Door, a 3 mana legendary artifact that you can tap to draw a card, discard a card, and you can pay 4 to transform it, but only if there are 4 or more permanent types among cards in your graveyard. So, between artifacts, battles, creatures, enchantments, lands, and planeswalkers, you need to cover at least 4 of those. The majority of decks may not have planeswalkers, may not have battles in them, but creatures tend to be more common. Obviously, lands you can get to the graveyard in certain ways, and artifacts and enchantments you can just discard things like that. But also, you might have creatures that are enchantments and creatures that are also artifacts. So that kind of helps cover those requirements a little bit faster. And then if you pay 4, you can transform it into the core, where it can add X mana of any one color, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. So potentially lots and lots of mana. As long as you've got something to do with it, that's fine. And having the tap ability to start with to draw a card, discard a card, is good for helping you find combo pieces or for filling your own graveyard for Descend. So yeah, there's different things that are useful in terms of what it can do as the original artifact. What it does transformed is only really good if you need that much mana, which you might not need at that time. Okay, so next we have Roaming Throne, a 4 mana 4/4 artifact creature. It has Ward 2, and you can choose a creature type when it enters the battlefield, and the Throne is the chosen type in addition to its other types. So in this set, you might be choosing Merfolk, Pirate, Vampire, Dinosaur, the most common ones you're going to find. And if a triggered ability of another creature of that type triggers, it triggers an additional time. So if you play out, the dinosaur that draws extra cards, it will do it twice. If you play out that dinosaur that makes the 2 eggs when it enters, it will make 4 eggs instead. So anything that triggers automatically will be doubled. Will you see this in dinosaur decks? I don't know. Would you rather have another dinosaur than have this? It depends. If you have lots of other ETB triggers and things like that, then maybe you'd rather have this. Makes it more likely to turn up in Standard rather than turning up in Draft, because it's going to be hard to get value out of this in Draft. Although a 4 mana 4/4 with War 2 isn't that bad. Even if you don't get the extra like ETB triggers and things from those creatures, it's not too bad. So you'd probably still take it, possibly still use it. But it's you can get a lot more value out of this when you build your deck around it. Okay, then we have Runaway Boulder. It's a 6 mana artifact with flash. When it enters, it does 6 damage to a creature an opponent controls, which is okay. 6 mana, instant speed, 6 damage. Not terrible, but it's kind of expensive, and there are probably better ways of removing things for less than 6 mana. You can also cycle this, which is discarding it and drawing another card, which can help you if you get it early on and you don't want it, you can get rid of it. Also, that's putting an artifact in your graveyard for like craft with artifact or for descend, permanent going into the graveyard. So it can help in those ways as well. There are some extra synergies that work with it. Okay, then we have Scampering Surveyor, a 4-mana 3/2 artifact creature. When it enters the battlefield, you search your library for a basic land or cave card, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So it's ramping you, it's putting the land or the cave directly onto the battlefield, which is really good. But you're going to need to have a deck full of caves that really care, that cares about caves. Put this out on the battlefield. If you're just trying to hit certain colors, then 4-mana 3/2 isn't the best way of doing it. So yeah, not the best card in terms of that. But if you build a deck that specifically cares about caves, this is going to be much better than just using it in something else. Okay, the next one we have is Sorcerous Spyglass, a 2-mana artifact. When it enters the battlefield, you look at the opponent's hand and you choose any card name. Activated abilities of sources with the chosen name can't be activated unless they're mana abilities. So you can shut down your opponent, if you know they have a certain card that's going to cause you lots of trouble. They have a Planeswalker that you're not going to like, then you can basically mean that Planeswalker do nothing, which is pretty good. If you're playing a control deck where you're expecting them to have a Wandering Emperor, you could play this out and, turn off a Wandering Emperor straight away, which would be pretty frustrating for the opponent. So definitely better in Standard, especially considering the opponent is more likely to have 4 copies of a really good card, whereas in Draft, there's a good chance they only have 1 copy of it anyway, and they might not draw it, and you don't know what they're going to have, so you kind of have to guess or choose a card name that they have in their hand at the time. So it's going to be much more useful in Standard when someone might have 4 copies of Atraxa and not activated abilities with Atraxa, but 4 copies of Liliana, and you want to make sure they can't use Liliana. You could do this on turn 2 potentially. So yeah, more likely to see in Standard, but even then, probably more likely to be a sideboard card because the chance that your opponent isn't going to have cards that have activated abilities that are a big problem for you, in which case this card would be dead. So probably more of a sideboard card. Okay, then we've got Sunbird Standard, a 3-mana artifact that can tap for 1 mana of any color, and you can craft this with 1 or more cards of permanence. It costs 5 mana to do it, and when you do, it transforms. So it transforms into the Sunbird Effigy, an artifact creature where its power and toughness are equal to the number of colors among cards you use to craft it. So when you're choosing your cards to craft, you want to make sure you get as many colors as possible. So it can get up to 5/5. Also flying, vigilance, and haste, which is really good. And you can tap it for each color among the exiled cards used to craft it. You add 1 mana of that color. So it can be aggressive and it can start attacking, or it can be used just to ramp you. If you've got all 5 colors, then you can tap this and add 1 mana of each of those 5 colors. So it can ramp you a lot if you get the right colors. Probably something you're more likely to use in Constructed, where you can build a deck around it. 3 mana to add 1 mana of any color isn't terrible. You could potentially use that in Draft, just not the best thing, and only use it if you have awkward mana requirements anyway. Okay, then we have Swashbuckler's Whip, a 1 mana equipment. It gives a creature reach and the ability to pay 2 tap to tap another artifact or creature, and you can pay 8 and tap it to discover 10. Discover 10 is pretty big. Discover 10 pretty much covers anything. Majority of things I can think about, yes. Discover 10 will basically allow you to get it. It's a bit like an Natali trigger. It could exile literally anything off the top of your land and play it. You're not going to want to have lots of little things if you're discovering 10 for 8 mana. There's quite a lot to pay. So interesting to be able to discover that much. If you can get other synergies from discovering, casting from exile, that kind of thing, then it could be useful. But that is really expensive, the 8 mana. Okay, then we have Tarion Soulcleaver, a 1 mana equipment. Whenever another artifact or creature is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you put a +1/+1 counter on the equipped creature, and it costs 2 to equip. So There's a good chance lots of artifacts or creatures could go to the graveyard for different reasons. You could even just sacrifice treasure tokens, and that is an artifact going into the graveyard, even though it's not a permanent and it's not a card. Well, it's not permanent. Even though it's a token and it's not a card, it can still go to the graveyard when it's sacrificed, even though it doesn't stay in the graveyard. So, giving a creature vigilance and lots of +1 counters as time goes on is not bad. It'd be great if you gave it like flying as well or something. But yeah, you need a way to know you're going to sacrifice artifacts or creatures, or attack and let them be blocked and killed, or use them to chump block, and then you're going to grow one creature really big. That's pretty good. Then we have the Millennium Calendar, and this is like my favorite jank card of the set so far. You can get time counters on it as things untap during your untap step to get it started. Then you can pay 2 to double the number of time counters on it, and when there are 1,000 or more time counters on it, you can sacrifice it, and each opponent loses 1,000 life. So instant win, right? In theory, unless they, can't be killed by damage somehow or have more than 1,000 life. Pretty much instant kill. But in order to get to 1,000 counters, you're going to need to double this quite a few times, like 10 turns worth or something, to be able to get to 1,000. There are other ways you can untap this and retap it. Or if you want to win with this card without having to get to 1,000 time counters, you could also play something like All Will Be One, where you can tap it, and if you add 10 counters or 20 counters, All Will Be One can deal that damage directly to any target. So that can finish a game much quicker than getting to 1,000 time counters. So we'll see if that gets, I'm definitely going to try to make a deck that can win with, 1,000 time counters. Whether it's very realistic or not, we'll find out. Probably best in a white and blue artifact synergy control deck. Could win other ways as well, but it's nice to have this way potentially to win. So fun one to play with, probably not very competitive, but interesting jank combo card. Okay, then we have Threefold Thunderhulk, a 7-mana creature. It's a 0/0, but comes with 3+1 counters. It starts as a 3/3. It also makes 3 other 1/1 gnome artifact creatures. Then, when it attacks, you can create a number of additional 1/1 gnome creatures equal to the power on the Thunderhulk. So if you get to boost its power, potentially by sacrificing artifacts and putting a +1/+1 counter on top of it, another one, or anything else that can add additional +1 counters or proliferate or something like that, then you can attack and go really, really wide with lots of gnomes. And there are some cards that care about the number of non-land permanents that you have, things like the Bunnycorn from this set, other gnome artifacts that care about that. So one good way to go wide, you kind of need those other things to make it work, because otherwise a 7-mana 3/3 that makes 3 other 1/1s is kind of good in some ways, but probably not the first thing I'd want to use in a draft game. And then we have Treasure Map. So this is an interesting one. It's 2-mana artifact. You can pay 1, tap it, scry 1, a landmark counter on it. If you do it 3 or more times, or if you have 3 or more landmark counters on it, then you get to transform Treasure Map and create 3 treasure tokens. That helps you ramp at certain times. And it transforms into the Treasure Cove, where you can sacrifice a treasure and draw a card. So if you don't want to use those treasures to ramp to cast something big, then every treasure you make can be used to draw you an extra card anyway, which is pretty good, considering this is just tap and sacrifice a treasure. Draw a card, there's no other mana requirements, you just need to have some treasures. So I can see this working out pretty well for that reason. Probably not so much in draft, but in constructed, yeah, I can see that working. Okay, and then we're on to the lands. We're going to run through the lands really quickly. There are a lot of caves, and there are a lot of 2-color lands that can become creatures, like we've had in Eldraine. We now have a few of those in Ixalan as well to kind of complete the set. So, first of all, we have Hidden Courtyard. It enters tapped. You can pay 5 to make it become... you can pay 5 to make it discover 4. These are the cave ones, not the creature ones. So, we have this in other colors as well. Comes in tapped. Just tap for normal mana, or you can pay 5 to discover 4. You have to sacrifice the Courtyard, so you only get it once. But yeah, there's basically that for every color. So we've got the Hidden Cataract with blue. does the same thing. Pay 5, sacrifice, discover 4. You have the Hidden Necropolis in black, which does the same thing. The Hidden Volcano in red does the same thing. And we have the Hidden Nursery in green that does the same thing. So if you care about discovering, casting things from exile, this could potentially be good in a game that goes longer. And when you get to that point, but I wouldn't necessarily have too many in your deck unless you care about caves or discover is somehow going to work really well for you. More than the average person. Okay, so then we have the 2-color lands. We have Restless Anchorage, the blue-white land, which is going to make Azorius players really happy. We already have loads of blue-white lands, probably more than any other color, I think, but it tends to work better with soldiers. This can pay 3, become a 2/3 blue bird, white and blue bird creature with flying. It's still a land. Whenever it attacks, create a map token. Maps are artifacts entering, so blue and white is good for artifacts. Artifacts entering is good for other things. The number of artifacts you control is good for certain things. So, and obviously maps are ways to explore as well. Go about exploring, and that's going to be good anyway. So really good creature land there. Then we have the Restless Reef. It's the blue and black creature land. You can pay 4 mana, turn it into a blue 4/4 blue and black shark creature with Death Touch. And when it attacks, the target player mills 4 cards. So there's a few different things here that causing mill to happen. I don't think they're intended to mill your opponent out, beat them that way. We already have Jace to do that, and like breach the multiverse, bring Jace back and do it again. That's a good way to finish off an opponent. With this, it might be more likely to mill yourself to enable Descend. Might be the intention, considering it's blue and black, but it could work either way. And then we have the black and red land, which is the Restless Vents. And you can pay 3 mana to turn it into a 2/3 black and red insect creature with menace. And when it attacks, you may discard a card, and if you do, draw a card. So that helps with Descend again. Also helps you find combo pieces and do various things. Maybe it's good as a blocker if you need it urgently. So lots of things you can do with these 2-color lands. Okay, then we have Restless Ridgeline. Really welcome addition for all those Gruul dinosaur players. Enters tapped. You can add red or green mana, and you can pay 4 mana to turn it into a 3/4 dinosaur. What a surprise! And when it attacks, another attacking creature gets +2/+0 till the end of turn, and you get to untap that creature. So it works really well on dinosaurs with trample in particular. So yeah, definitely include this in a dinosaur deck if you can. And then we have the Restless Prairie, the green and white creature land. You can pay 4, becomes a 3/3 green and white llama creature. And when it attacks other creatures you control, get +1/+1 till the end of turn. So to get most benefit out of this, you want to have as many other creatures as possible. Go as wide as possible with tokens. And then, get some extra damage through at the end. So yeah. Again, it's just a land card with 2 different colours. Can potentially do different things. Okay, then we've got some caves to work through. We've got Captivating Cave. You can tap for colourless. You can pay 1 tap to add 1 mana of any colour, which can be useful when you have to hit all those different colours, especially in draft. And then you can also pay 4 to sacrifice it and put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature only as a sorcery. I don't see the huge benefit of doing that, but it does put a cave into your graveyard, which helps with Descend. So, if you need to put 2 +1 counters on something, then, there's a way of doing it. But otherwise, to me, it's just a land. Okay, then we have Cavern of Souls. This one is a bit more than just a land. This one works really well with certain creature type decks. You choose a creature type when it enters. You can tap it for colorless, or you can tap to add 1 mana of any color for that creature spell. So we already have Secluded Courtyard to tap for any mana of a certain creature type. So it's not replacing that. It's adding to it and adding the ability that the spells of those creature types cannot be countered. So you don't have to worry about counter spells at all if you're casting creatures using the Cavern of Souls mana. So it's one way to really annoy those control players. It sees a lot of play in various formats. It's a really good card. People are very excited for this one. Definitely pick it up if you see it. Definitely use it in basically any tribal creature deck You have all dinosaurs, all vampires, goblins, whatever it might be, Phyrexians. Yeah, definitely include Cavernous Souls if you have it. Okay, then we have Cavernous Maw. It's another cave. Tap it for colorless, or pay 2. It becomes a 3/3 elemental creature till end of turn. You can only activate it if the number of other caves you control plus the number of cave cards in your graveyard is 3 or greater. So, caves care about lots of caves. Paying 2 mana for this to become a 3/3 creature till end of turn is better than most other creature lands for the just raw value in stats. So yeah, if you have lots of caves working together, it's a good one to add. And also, this being a cave enables other cave synergies, even if you don't use its, become a 3/3 elemental ability. Okay, then we have Echoing Depths, another cave. When it enters, enters tapped as a copy of any land card in a graveyard, except it's also a cave. So interesting one to copy other things that are in the graveyard. Then we've got Forgotten Monument, a cave that can tap for colorless, or can also give you the ability to say other caves you control have tap and pay 1 life to add 1 mana of any color. So these caves all tap for colorless. If you want to be able to tap for other mana colors, then you can pay a life to do it. But paying a life doesn't necessarily have to be bad. If you have lots of life gain, you don't care. If you have something like Ashiok, you can't pay life, you'll just exile a card. And if you have something like Rowan, Sign of War, then you want to take some damage in order to make your other things cheaper. So there are different ways where you might want to use this. In a deck where you have lots of colors that are going to be harder to hit otherwise. Okay, then we have Pit of Offerings. Enters tapped. When it enters, you exile up to 3 target cards from a graveyard. You can tap for colorless mana, or you can tap to add 1 mana of any of the exiled card's colors. So, it can exile something from your graveyard or the opponent's graveyard if that helps. And you can basically just use it for anything of those colors. So if you have, depending on what else is going on in your deck, if you have something that is like 3 colors and you exile that, maybe you've discarded it or something, then you can use this to cover those different, all those different colors. So it can be pretty good, but there's so many other ways of getting certain colors in standard. Although most of them happen to be rare, so maybe because this is uncommon, you might see this in budget decks rather than rare lands. But either way, I think you should invest in rare lands if you don't have them, because they do work out pretty well. So this isn't that exciting. Okay, then we have Promising Vein. This is another cave where you can tap for colorless, or you can pay 1 to sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land, put it onto the battlefield tapped. So it's a bit like an Evolving Wilds, apart from the fact you need to pay an extra mana to do this, or it can be used for colorless by itself, and it enables other cave synergies. So if you have caves needing to be in your graveyard, or permanents needing to be in your graveyard, then sacrificing this, putting it into your graveyard is going to help all those things. And then we have Sunken Citadel. It's another cave. It enters the battlefield tapped. As it enters, you get to choose a color. You can add 1 mana of that color, or add 2 mana of that color if it's spent to activate abilities of land sources. So there are various things that lands can do. One thing is to transform into creatures, is an obvious one. So you can potentially use this to help enable that, or other things that your lands can do as well. So yeah, in the right deck with lots of caves, it could work. Same thing for basically every other cave. And then we have Volatile Vault. It's another cave, taps for colorless, or you can pay 1 to sacrifice it and destroy a non-basic land an opponent controls. That player may search a library for a basic land, put it onto battlefield, and then you get to create a treasure token. There's a little bit like a Field of Ruin, apart from you just get a treasure token at the end. It's a little bit cheaper to activate. So in some ways it's better, in some ways it's not so good. So, a bit like an Evolving Wilds, but it helps. Evolving Wilds, a bit like a Field of Ruin, but also adds to cave synergies as well. And that's the end of the cards from Ixalan. We've covered all the cards, and I'm glad it's over because this takes some time. Let me know in the comments if you enjoy this kind of content or think it's valuable. On the next set, I might do something slightly different, just because this makes very long videos. I think there are better ways to get the value across in a smaller amount of time. So let me know what you think in the comments if you made it this far. If you think I should do this slightly differently next time, or anything else I can do to improve these styles of videos. Yeah, so we're going to get into, in the upcoming videos, we're going to be doing drafting of the set. We're going to be looking at different ways to build your collection of the set. And then we're going to be building some different constructed standard decks out of the various things we open and pick from drafts. And the plan at the moment is when I get to 100 packs to open all those, show you the cards I get, and see what kind of things we're going to be building over the next couple of months. So that's what we've got coming up from from content on this channel over the next few weeks as Ixalan comes out. So stick around for that. Let me know what kind of things you are looking forward to seeing. And also, don't forget, we do have a Patreon that you can join, which gets you access to our Discord server, which has other bonus content on it as well. You can vote on content, you can make suggestions of other content, or you can just use the bonus things we have there to help you get the most value out of the game or ask me questions directly anytime. So lots of things you can do. Look at the link for the Patreon in the description and join it if you want to help support the channel a bit more. We also have at the highest level a giveaway for a $25 gift card, which is happening at the beginning of December. So join it before then to get in with a chance of winning that $25 gift card that you can use on mtgacodes.com to add more decks, packs, and other things to your MTG Arena account. So there we go. That's all we've got time for. Thanks for watching this video to the end. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you in the next one.